Hello, everyone. Welcome to our live event discussing activity levels for different trips. I just want to give folks another minute to hop on. We do have a lot to cover, so we're going to start pretty much on time so that we can get through all of the information. I know this is something that a lot of guests have asked us about, a lot of questions about activity levels where you might fit as you're planning a trip. So we want to make sure we can cover all of this in detail. So we'll just give everyone another 20, 30 seconds to sign on, and then we'll do our introductions and get started. But thank you for joining us. We've been really excited to present this. It's something that we think about every day in terms of planning trips and making sure folks are aligned with the right trips based on their interest and activity level. So we're really excited to share our knowledge with you and give you some insider tips about these different activity levels. So just to do a quick introduction, my name is Emily. I'm part of the Destination Expert team. My colleagues Amanda and Ali are joining me as well. We're going to all present. And this is something that we talk about every day. So we're the folks that when you call in and you're thinking about planning a trip, we're your first point of contact. And we certainly talk about activity levels and other questions, throughout the day. So again, my name's Emily. Amanda and Ali are my colleagues and co-hosts on this adventure. And I think we'll get started just since I know we have a lot to cover. So first, we want to welcome everyone. Just a few housekeeping topics to go over. We are recording this for future use. So just so you know that this is a recorded event. We also have a chat. So if you have any questions, please use that chat function. We're going to collect those throughout the conversation, and then we'll answer the questions at the end. Again, we do have quite a bit to cover, so we want to make sure we get through all of those details that we want to share. And then at the end, we'll go over some of those Q&As. Another thing we wanted to mention is we are going to go into a couple trips as we go through the different activity levels. And if you have questions about specific trips, we love to answer those, but we would prefer that you email us. We'll put our email details and contact details so that we can have those direct conversations for those individual trips. Our colleague Ellie is monitoring the chat, so she'll be there answering some questions as we go through the conversation, and then we'll collect those at the end of the chat, and we'll go over some of those Q&As. So with that said, I'm going to pass the baton over to my colleague Amanda, who's going to introduce AdventureWomen and just share a little bit more about our philosophy of travel.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. Thank you all for joining. Really excited to have you all here. Just a kind of quick background on AdventureWomen and what you can expect if you were to join us on one of our fabulous adventures. In case you didn't know, we have been leading adventure travel for women since 1982. That is more than 40 years of incredible trips. So you'll be joining a long line of women who've been adventuring all over the world. We have over 75 different trip options, and that is why these activity levels are so helpful, just to try and make sure that you know which of these many you can choose from would be right for you at the right time. So just a few more details about our guests. We do have quite a wide age range. Our typical guests are between 50 and 65, but we really do range from teenagers all the way up to women in their 80s. So whatever age you are right now, if you want to travel with a daughter, a mother, an aunt, whoever, everybody is welcome to join. We have women of all different backgrounds. So lots of solo travelers, married, in a relationship, divorced, widowed, all across the board. So you're certainly going to find someone who has a shared life experience that you can connect with. And at the core, our women are curious, they're active, they want to be out doing fun activities, taking adventures, challenging themselves, pushing themselves a little bit outside of their comfort zones, and learn about the places where they're traveling, the cultures that are there, and just really interacting with the locals. We do go in small groups, so this is not a large coach bus style tour. We always have small groups, usually, no more than 15 or 16 on a typical trip. 8 to 12 is a pretty good average. So you'll be in good company. Our trip managers are fantastic. You're going to love them. So you get a dedicated trip manager for each trip. You'll be able to ask all sorts of questions, everything from flight details to who's going to meet you at the airport, when, where, and why, what you should pack, how you should prep, everything. They're going to help you out from start to finish. They are such a huge asset to the team and to each of you as guests. We work with passionate local guides and ambassadors. So our guides on the ground are local. They know this place inside and out. They know the history, they know the culture, and they're there to answer all of your questions and to share such detailed insight and information. We also usually send an AdventureWomen ambassador on most of our trips. So that's someone who is there to, make sure things are running smoothly and wonderfully for you. And they're people who have traveled with us extensively, been on many trips all over the world, and they just really bring a fun vibe to each of the trips as well. One of our key elements is connecting with local women. So these women to women experiences on each of our trips, we want you to connect with and be able to talk with women who are from this place and space, ask them questions, get to know them, share in activities. This may be cooking classes and art classes, or it could just be conversation. So it's a really neat opportunity to actually get to know people from that space. So I'm going to kick this back over to Emily. That's sort of your broad level AdventureWomen overview. But Emily, if you want to let us know what we're doing here today.
Yeah, so this is the topic at hand. We're, of course, talking about activity levels. That's why everyone is here. And something we think about when we're starting these conversations is we want to make sure we're providing all the details that we can at both a high macro level so that you can kind of see where you fit in, and then also on a trip level, because there are nuances to each trip as you're looking through the different activity levels. So we're going to present both kind of the macro high level and the micro kind of nitpicky, small details for a trip in each of these categories. So you can get a sense of where do I fit? How does this look for me as I'm choosing a trip for the future? So Amanda, if you want to go forward to the next slide. So this is introducing our different activity levels. For folks who have traveled with us in the past, you may remember that we used to have 4. We now have 5. We recategorized a few trips that were kind of between levels, and we felt like if we added this 5th level, then we'd be able to better put these trips in the right bucket. So in terms of the levels, we now have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and you can see the different paces and names of the different categories. So for easy pace, these are leisurely. These are not strenuous. They're more kind of cultural journeys. The moderate trips tend to be a little bit more active with some active options. Dynamic can be your intro to hiking trips, maybe not the most strenuous hiking, but if you've never hiked before, those are some good options. Our multi-sport trips also fall into that level 3 category. High energy tends to be multi-day hiking trips, so that really kind of encompasses that activity level. And then challenging is the high octane. You're going to be at higher altitudes, or if you're not at a high altitude, you might have longer treks with more elevation gains and losses. And again, we're going to go into all the details, but just to give you a visual for what this looks like in terms of all the different activity levels. And we'll get started with the first level. I'm going to pass this over to Allie to present Easy Pace.
All right, thank you, Emily. So welcome everyone again, and I'm happy to kick this off. So jumping in, we'll start with our level 1 here, which is the Easy Pace. And I think this one's really important because it just stresses like our trips can be very inclusive. And our Easy Pace here is a great place to start. We're not just treks and Kilimanjaro, we have kind of a trip for everyone. So I'd love to start here. So level 1 Easy Pace. So this is designed for women that enjoy gentle activity. We like to say you're exercising your mind over your body. There's heavy cultural immersion, but you're going to have time to yourself. There's definitely activities, and there's a variety. They're just going to be a little bit lighter, basically. You're going to walk. There's continuous activity, which could be museums, city tours, street tours, things like that. So you'll get your steps in there, and then you can participate in these diverse activities. We can also provide any opting out as well. So for most activities, it is possible when you see on the itinerary something that we would be able to find an alternate activity for you. You can just explore the area and meet up with the group. So that's important to know for this category and the next as well. But this is, again, really heavy on the cultural immersion piece. So maybe some different things to navigate there, but again, very inclusive. And so some examples here are going to be, we start with our safaris here, and Emily will jump into the next slide and speak from personal experience. And so we have our safaris, which is Tanzania, South Africa, just for two examples. And that is what you imagine as far as like game drives, wildlife viewing, light hiking, walkabouts, things like that. And then we go into like Turkey and the Baltics, and those are easy pace for different reasons. And I think it's important to understand, and why we're hosting this as well, that things fall into different categories for different reasons. So for example, here, the safaris, like I said, the game drives and wildlife viewing, Morocco, Turkey, Baltics, definitely still have a big variety of activities and places to see, but they're going to be more of the walking tour types versus having a challenging hike in these ones. So again, you have your activities. They're just going to be on the lighter side and heavy into the cultural immersion piece with time for yourself as well.
Yeah, thank you,
So
Allie.
I'll pass it back to Emily. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm the Tanzania expert. I lived there. I've done this trip multiple times. Like many, I left my heart in Tanzania the first time I visited. And why we wanted to present this is such a good example of the easy pace trip, as Ali mentioned. It's very experiential, very immersive. A lot of folks come for the wildlife, but it's really the cultural elements that really stick with people. So Tanzania has over 120 cultural groups, and the Maasai, of course, are the most iconic. And you start your trip with 3 days in a private nature refuge where you really get to do a deep dive in Maasai culture, visiting with Maasai women, visiting their handicraft associations, and of course, one of the most powerful and profound experiences people have really on any of our trips is the evening where you sit down with a Maasai elder, where they just move all the men out of the camp and you have a translator, and the women get to ask questions back and forth. And it's such an interesting conversation. And it's something that a lot of people come back saying, I went for the wildlife, but it was the people that really I felt so connected with. And we love to hear that because, of course, the women to women experiences are such a big piece of what we do. And this really highlights on our easy pace trips how much emphasis we put on cultivating these cultural connections. Some other examples of things you'll do when you visit Tanzania. You'll have some hikes in the private nature refuge. They're really walks, but we just want to mention this because you do walk quite a bit on our easy pace trips. As Ali mentioned, when you're in the cities on the Baltics or Turkey, Morocco, you will be walking anywhere from a couple miles, maybe 3 miles, uneven terrain, cobblestones, things like that. So we just want to emphasize that in terms of mobility, so you're aware what this looks like with easy pace trips. We're not putting you on a bus and just taking you on a hop on, hop off tour. You're really going to be part of this experience. And so you'll have some opportunities to do a night drive in the private nature refuge, and then wildlife viewing. Of course, that's why everyone comes to Tanzania. You want those up close and personal experiences, seeing giraffes, seeing the big five, seeing the Great Migration. You'll have all those opportunities on this trip. And this is an example of the small planes, the bush planes you'll be taking from place to place, and then the Land Rover Defender, which we use for our wildlife drives. So again, this is something that really anyone can do. We see people from teens and families traveling all the way up to people in their 80s and 90s. I've had some women in their 90s take a safari with us before. All right, Alex, back to you.
All right, I'm back. So we'll move right into the next level. So level 2 here, we also consider our moderate level. So this is going to be quite a balance of still the cultural immersion, like with any trip, but also it's going to be a bit lengthier, maybe slightly more challenging physical activities on this one. So again, just kind of a level up from the easy pace we just spoke about. So a blend of the movement, still the relaxation piece. This is great for people who kind of want to push themselves a little out of their comfort zone, try something a little bit new, and just things to be aware of as well with this. So like Emily spoke about, the potential mileage for easy pace, the mileage here that we're talking more for moderate trips is going to be a little bit longer. You could be doing a couple hours a day, 3 to 5 hours, uneven terrain, things like that. So balance is an important factor for these trips, as well as just pace and things like that. So I'm just going to highlight the next trip will be Croatia that we're highlighting. However, we have a few of the moderate pace trips here as well. And again, it can be kind of nuanced on these categories. So for Iceland here, that is going to be, it's a big pace in the schedule. So you guys are on the move. It's multi-sport, a huge variety of activities. And for this one in particular, since you're kind of on the move all the time with it, it's still incredibly inclusive, but now you're looking at things like exploring glaciers, lagoons, and all different kinds of activities between sledding, kind of all of that stuff. So Iceland falls into that category for the pace, the multi-sport, and then as well as Baja. So Baja's pretty similar in terms of activities. So you've moved into a bit of kind of like opportunities for paddle boarding, snorkeling, swimming, things like that. And it's also important, the balance piece to highlight here, because in Baja, you will be getting out of smaller boats, you may be kayaking, things like that. And same for with Croatia that we'll go into more detail about. Sri Lanka, Thailand, Vietnam, all phenomenal trips. These are going to be, like I said, kind of the step up in activity level, which could be different things. Part of it, Sri Lanka, it can be very, very hot there. You have ancient ruins, same for Vietnam and things. So you're going to be exploring more. There's going to be a bit more hiking, a bit more physical challenge. The environment might be a little bit more challenging, but still city exploration, Vietnam. There's a 17-mile bike ride. It is flat and accessible, but these are just good things to know. And of course, again, we could arrange an optional activity. But we'll kind of dive into Croatia here and just highlight some more examples of why we have this as a level 2 trip. And so for Croatia, this is our yacht trip, which is very, very incredible. It's also my background. And so Croatia is an incredibly popular trip. You have the yachting experience, you have the private chef, relaxation, go at your own pace. However, you still do have the physical pieces of it. So Croatia, typical old world Europe, cobblestones, uneven terrain, in and out of those boats again while exploring. Blue Cave, we're going into a national park, do like hike, city tour, museum visits, all of those kinds of activities combined. So you have that. So heavy on the cultural and relaxation, but also some more challenging activities. One or two that I'd like to highlight here is the biking tour. So once you're out into it, you have pretty flat terrain, nice biking experience. However, getting to that place, you may have to carry the bike up a little stairs. There could be a hill in the beginning, some gravel. So there is some terrain things happening as well as carrying your bike up. And then we also have the swimming and paddleboarding opportunities. All awesome. Go at your own pace. Do it however often you'd like. There's plenty of stops for it. But as you can see, there is a ladder to get in and out of the yacht. So just things like that we like to highlight to think about when it comes to mobility. And so again, moderate is a phenomenal kind of combination of balance of both things and what you're comfortable with. So that's really a piece of the level two trips here.
Awesome. Thanks, Allie. I'm going to jump back in here and take us forward with level 3, which we call dynamic. And I think that's a really apt word to use for a lot of the trips that fall into this level. These are regular activity on varied terrain with moderate elevation gains. So, you know, if you are already into being outdoors and you like to hike, but you're not quite ready for like trek level hiking, this is a really good way to introduce yourself to, you know, a few new activities and a few new challenges. So on these types of dynamic trips, you might have a few consecutive days of hiking or active activities for, like a half day or so, but these are going to be low to moderate altitude. So we're not talking about, really intensive hiking trips yet. And this is still more achievable for those of us who maybe are sort of the weekend warrior types getting out into the local hills and mountains at home. Other things to consider, definitely diverse terrain. So more of the uneven surfaces that we were talking about before in the lower level trips, but you might have more of the inclines here, more of the natural obstacles. So anything from like a shallow creek crossing to rocky footing, root covered paths, things that you just have to be a little bit more adept at navigating, and that you're willing to go over these kind of more challenging pathways. So, you want to be comfortable and physically fit in order to cover an average of 5 to 8 miles on some of these days. This is, again, not back to back to back intensive trekking days, but you might have a day or two where you'll, be pretty active, and then the next day will be a little bit more relaxing, or a half day, and then the rest of the day is a little bit more relaxing. So this is a really cool in-between leveling for some of our multi-activity trips. So again, some examples of those, Costa Rica, which I'm going to do a little deep dive into, is a multi-sport, multi-activity type of trip. Ireland is a little bit more hiking, same with Scotland. Those are more hiking days, but not quite trek level. These aren't intensive, high altitude, big gains and losses kind of hiking, just more enjoyable. I used to live in Scotland. I love talking about that one. So if anybody wants to talk more in depth about what that looks like, I'm always happy to revisit my old home. And some other examples, Moab, when we're in Utah and doing lots of different activities there. Same with Norway, varied activities. These are, trips that are going to keep you on the move and keep you doing some fun things, especially things that maybe you haven't tried before. These are not ones that you're going to have to specifically train for in the way that our higher level activity trips are, but just be open to trying something new and maybe challenging yourself a little bit, going outside your comfort zone a little bit. So with that, I'm going to highlight one of our trips that does that. We get kind of feedback on Costa Rica a lot about people saying, I had never tried this, I had never tried that. And that was really cool. I'm really proud of myself for testing, and trying something new. So a couple examples of what you might do on our Costa Rica trip. You're going to spend a couple days in a beautiful national park. To get to the accommodations, you're on a pretty good boat ride. So, getting in and out of a boat, this isn't like the yacht level that we saw in Croatia. This is a smaller boat. So, you're not getting a nice ladder in and out. You'll be stepping onto and out of a boat. So just keeping the balance thing in mind again. And then park exploration, that can be short hikes, short walks, or going by canoe. So again, just getting in and out of those smaller boats, feeling comfortable with that. Hiking and swimming at a waterfall. So, again, not huge gains, losses on these hikes, but out in the national park, out on this very natural terrain, in order to get to fun spots like these waterfalls. We also do this really fun river float. So you can see those ladies tubing there. It is really relaxed, but you may be carrying that tube over some rocky terrain to get to the launching point or to get back out. And zip lining. So if you've never tried zip lining, it is quite the rush, super fun. The actual activity itself isn't super active, but you might be challenging yourself. There's some heights involved. You're, soaring across jungle canopies. So just being ready for an extra little challenge. And a couple other fun activities on Costa Rica. Whitewater rafting. So this is one that we hear from people. I know Allie and I have had these conversations on the phone a lot with people considering this trip, saying, I'm not sure about the rafting. That kind of scares me. I've never done that before. These are lower level class rapids. We're not throwing you in the deep end here. You're going to be able to, get the experience without the intensity of some whitewater rafting trips elsewhere. So this is a really good intro level. And it's something you can, again, challenge yourself. You're not going to have to train for this. There's nothing you like in the prep guide to say this is how you get ready to try whitewater rafting. just be ready to challenge yourself and try something new. And generally these types of level trips, the level 3 trips, are just a lot more outdoor fun. So, less of the city walks and the museum tours, more active adventure outdoors. So just something to consider. So with that, I'm going to move us up to level 4. We're starting to get into the more serious stuff here. So I'll go through this level and then let Emily do a deep dive on one of her favorite trips to talk about. So for level 4, this is high energy. These are definitely for more regular hikers, for more experienced adventurers. If you are already somebody who spends a lot of time outdoors and enjoys challenging yourself, this is probably a good area for you to consider. So, for level 4 trips, you're going to be definitely hiking on uneven trails. We're getting into more steep inclines here, more rough terrain, and some more challenging obstacles. Mileage wise, could be 6 to 12 miles, in some back-to-back days here. You could be looking at gains and losses, in the couple of thousands of feet. So this is definitely more intensive. If you're just starting hiking, maybe the level 3. If you are regularly out there and trying to challenge yourself a little bit more, level 4 is probably more appropriate. In terms of the actual, prep, you want to be training for these. Level 4 requires some training now. So we'll give you suggestions that are a little bit more trip specific once you're signed up. But something to think about is, carrying your day pack up to maybe 20 pounds, and being able to train with that. So, things like getting out on the trails, but also maybe just going and doing some Stairmaster and actually wearing your pack, wearing your boots, breaking those in. You also might see some more rustic lodging by the time we get to level 4. So once we're out in these sort of trek areas, it's a little bit more remote. So some of these accommodations are going to be a little bit more rustic, a little bit more basic. But if you've never tried that before, this is the space to do it in, right? We'll make sure that you're comfortable, you're safe, and yeah, maybe get a little bit more outside your comfort zone than you do at home on your own. Altitude is something to consider once we get here. So, this could be up to 8,000 feet of altitude. This is where you're going to start experiencing the symptoms of altitude. So, a little bit heavier breathing. And this is where, you're going to have to take it a little bit slower at some of those top level altitude positions. Some of our challenging trips are much further beyond that. So Emily will go into that a little bit more in the differentiation, but this is sort of right on the cusp. So depending on the trip that you're on, if altitude's a concern, then again, your trip manager will touch base on that. We're happy to talk to you about that before you're even booked, and go through the specifics for each trip. So if you've never hiked at altitude, give us a call and we can talk you through the ones that you're considering. Some of our high energy trips, Nepal. Now this is our low altitude Nepal. This is not Everest Base Camp. That is a different level. Low altitude Nepal is a good example of back-to-back days of trekking, and some good gains and losses there. But also still lots of cultural immersion. That's a really cool combination itinerary. Uganda, Jordan, these are ones that'll have specific days of pretty intensive hiking that you definitely want to prepare for. Uganda, looking for those gorillas, you have to be ready for all the conditions to seek them out, because it's not a zoo. This is out in nature. So, it could be a long day of trekking, but totally worth it once you finally find them. Australia is a good example of a multi-day trek. So that's going to be back-to-back days of some pretty good hikes there. New Zealand has some pretty good days of hiking as well, with good gains and losses. And the one that we're going to deep dive into is the Camino, which is we give a level 4 because of the back-to-back days. Emily has done this trip. She loves talking about this trip. So I'm going to hand it over to you so you can deep dive into why this is a level 4.
Yeah, sure. And yeah, I think this is a really good one to present because we're offering these kind of broader categories, and then the trips might fit parts of it, but not completely all of the category. And so for the Camino, there's really no big elevation gains and losses. There's really no altitude. But what makes this one a little bit more challenging in the high energy category is you are hiking for 8 to 9 days, sometimes up to 14 miles back to back. So for me, I fell into that dynamic category that Amanda was talking about, and weekend hikes. I loved hiking with friends and family. I'd never done a back-to-back hiking trip before. And so I felt like this was a really good one to kind of test and see how things went because this is not hard terrain. You're walking through different cities, different villages, paved roads, through some meandering forest paths. So the terrain is not difficult, and it really is like a walk. So when you do the Camino, you might have a 14-mile day, but you start in the morning, go for a few miles, have to get that espresso, stop, at a stand or a stall, have a little bit of espresso, go on a little bit farther, have lunch, and then continue into the afternoon. So it's broken up really nicely. So if you're not used to hiking that long, this is a great way to kind of try it out because it really is more of a walking experience, but it is the mileage. You're going to be going 65 miles total to earn your Compostela certificate. And so you do need to hit that so you can get the certificate. So it is a longer mileage trip, as opposed to when I get into the challenging category, you'll hear that the hikes are not as long, but they are more challenging because of the altitude and the elevation gains and losses. So that really is the Camino. I was able to train just by doing some longer hikes. I did a lot more walks with my dogs. I put my boots on, I put my day pack on just to get more comfortable. I wasn't really sure at that point what kind of shoes I'd wear for a multi-day kind of hiking experience. And so I actually brought both my hiking boots and a pair of tennis shoes. And those worked really well to kind of go back and forth. You see some women with trekking poles. A lot of people don't use them on this trip, whereas you do need them for the challenging trips. I brought mine. I barely use them, but some people do like them just to kind of have that extra support. So this is something that if you're in that dynamic category and you want to see if maybe the high energy trips are for you, this is a really good one to kind of test out, see how it goes. So many great women. It's such a cool experience because as you're walking through, there are other pilgrims that you see. That's what they call the folks, traveling on the Camino. They're telling you hi. They're supporting you. There's also a passbook that you have where you get stamps. That's part of earning your Compostela. So they're really encouraging you to just talk to some of the locals. You can get stamps at the different stalls that are set up, the coffee shops, the lunch counters, the hotels, and the stamps are like a collection of memories. And so that was really neat to have that experience. And so we were able to really immerse ourselves in the local culture and lore and history. And what I loved about this trip is that people could go at their own pace. So on our high energy trips and our challenging trips, we typically have two guides. Most of the time on the high energy trips, we do have ambassadors. On the challenging trips, we always do. And so that gives 2 or 3 people to help kind of break the group dynamic up because some people like to do the hike from point A to point B. They're so fast. I don't know how they do it. I cannot keep up with them. I am definitely in the back, the more leisurely pace, kind of taking everything in, soaking in the experience. And so there is that opportunity that for all different hiking levels to come on a trip like this and feel supported and feel like you can go at your pace. So with that, we'll move on to challenging. So this is a category that is certainly a level up or 2 or 3. And so for this type of experience, we say that these are such deeply rewarding hiking, trekking experiences, but they are designed for people that have a little bit more experience in hiking, being outdoors, and of course, being in excellent physical condition is really a requirement for these types of trips. We want to make sure you're successful. We want you to feel like you have all of the information to be able to train. And so for these trips, we do offer training tips and advice once you sign up. But we also encourage you to talk to me, Allie, or Amanda before you sign up so that we can just go into the different nuances of each one one. I'm going to explain why this category is a little bit broader than just, high altitude trips, which a lot of times people think of when they hear about challenging treks. And so we really do encourage that you give us a call. We can talk through all of the different details. We can talk through your background, how you've trained in the past, and what type of trips you enjoy doing. And also just hear a little bit more about why you're interested in a challenging trip. The why is really important for this because these are hard trips. They're going to push you so far out of your comfort zone. You're going to be exhausted. You're going to be sore. You might experience high altitude symptoms. And so you want to make sure when you're choosing a challenging trip that it's something that you really feel strongly about doing. Some people, it's Everest Base Camp. That is what they want to do, or Kilimanjaro, and they are so passionate about it. And that passion is going to help you get through those challenging days. So that mental wherewithal is a key part of this experience as well. So we always say, if you say, well, my friend wants to do this trip, I'm not really that interested, probably not going to be a good level for you because you want to have kind of your heart in the training and preparing for these types of trips. So these tend to be our higher altitude treks. So Kilimanjaro, Everest Base Camp, the Peru de Salcantay. And so you often are trekking, you could be trekking up to 14 miles per day. It depends on the trip. So when you're at the higher altitude trips, you tend to do more kind of like 6 to 8 miles, sometimes 10 miles, because you're going to be hiking high and sleeping low so that you can acclimate and prepare for this journey. On some of the lower altitude trekking trips, so those would be the Dolomites, Mount Blanc, the Switzerland trek, you will have longer days. They could be anywhere from 10 to 14 miles, but you're not going to be at those higher elevations, so you can do a little bit more mileage without feeling as exhausted. So those trips also tend to have kind of bigger elevation gains and losses, whereas the high altitude trips tend to have not as big, except coming down that last day from Kili. That's a pretty big day. So you want to be prepared for all these different pieces, and you really want to be in the best physical shape. The endurance is key, and then the commitment to training is really something that is so critical for your success and for the success of everyone that's on this trip with you. As Amanda mentioned, on the high energy trips, you might see a day or two in more kind of rustic accommodations. That is way more common on these types of trips. So Kilimanjaro, you're going to be sleeping in tents. So if you've never camped before, that's certainly something to consider. No showers. You're going to have several days on the mountain. You're not, doing any laundry. So that is definitely a different experience. And then on Everest Base Camp, you're staying in tea houses that as you get closer to base camp, they get way more scaled back and rustic. You don't have those creature comforts. And then the Peru trek, which we'll go into in a moment, that one's going to have a little bit more creature comfort. So that's a really good first-time trip if you're thinking about doing a higher elevation trip. The Dolomites, you're staying in huts, and so those are communal. They're really fun. This is actually my background is the Dolomites here. I've done this a couple times. It is my happy place. It's the most beautiful hiking I've ever done in my life. It's really hard. So folks has said on my trip, my second trip, they had done Kilimanjaro, the Peru trek, and Everest Base Camp, and they thought the Dolomites was harder. And it was harder because of those longer days and those steep elevation gains and losses, because it's straight up. It's not like we're used to in the US where you kind of have some switchbacks, you're kind of going, back and forth. Like you are going straight up for 5 or 6 miles, and that can be really, really intense. And then you have days where you have huge elevation losses. So you're not just going up, you're also going down. And if you're like me, the down is harder than the up. My knees are not what they used to be. I always lean on my trekking poles, and again, suggest that you all have them. But you also are staying in more kind of rustic accommodation. So the communal huts, you'll have everyone kind of in one room for some of them. So you might have, 8 or 9 AdventureWomen guests in one room, or maybe broken down into smaller groups of 3 or 4. And on the Switzerland trip, in Mount Blanc, you do have more kind of boutique alpine hotels, but you might have a day or two in a hut. So just kind of getting into that sense of adventure, because when you think about doing these hikes, the remote piece is why we're doing them. They're so beautiful. There aren't a lot of options for accommodations. And so you just want to be prepared that this is not going to be like a lot of our other trips where we really, put in those kind of 4-star creature comfort experiences. The one exception is the Peru trek, which I will go into now. And this one is such a great trip if you've been in that high energy category for a while, you're really into hiking, you've enjoyed those trips, and you want to do something that's at a higher altitude. So this one is a good one because you do have 6 back days of tough hiking, although the first day is kind of your, first hike where it's shorter, it's a couple miles. The guides are really just kind of gauging how people move to see if you're, in kind of this faster group or more leisurely group. And then you have those 5 days where you're going to be hiking anywhere from 6 to 10 miles. You do have a couple days with some steep elevation gains and losses, and you will be going up over 15,000 feet. So if you say, I've been in Colorado, I've done those 14ers, I didn't feel any of the altitude symptoms, this is a really good sign and you're probably a good fit for this trip. You don't have to have experience hiking at altitude. That's not a requirement. Very few people do, unless you live in Colorado or those areas, which I'm super jealous that they get those hikes all the time in their backyard. I'm in Pittsburgh. We have some hills, but it's not anything like the mountains. And so, if you don't have that altitude experience, it's not a requirement. It's not something that kind of takes you out of the running for doing a trip like this. You're just going to want to train as much as you can. You can't train for altitude, but you want to be in peak physical condition. And again, you will feel the symptoms once you start getting over, Amanda mentioned that 8,000, 9,000 feet. So on this trip, we have you flying into Cusco. That's 11,000 feet. We bring you down in the Sacred Valley for your first 2 days. That's 9,500 feet, just to kind of get used to, being at a higher elevation before you start the trek. You hike high, sleep low, and what that means is you'll hike to higher elevations and you'll sleep at a slightly lower elevation. So the majority of the time you're going to be at about 12,000, 12,800 feet for the highest elevation that you will sleep at. And then after you go over the pass and finish your hike, you'll end in Machu Picchu, experiencing the Citadel in all its glory. Amanda was there recently. It's amazing. Seeing it in person and being able to kind of hike into that area is absolutely incredible. And that's going to be at 8,000 feet above sea level. So it's a great gift at the end. You've earned it. It's your reward. And you get to stay in some really beautiful accommodations on this one. So these are more kind of higher end lodges. So if you really want to try a hike like this and have those creature comforts, this is a really good first time trip to do a high altitude trip. All right. So which level is right for you? It depends. So, this is something that I'm someone who goes between categories all the time. So I've done anything from safari, which I love doing, all the way up to challenging trips. And a lot of folks that travel with us are kind of the same way. They might just not be in one category, or you might be saying, I want to work towards something. Wow, the Dolomites just sounds like something I'd love to work towards. So we're always encouraging you to push yourself a little bit. You don't have to be perfect for that category to join that trip. We'll be there to help cheer you on, encourage you, offer tips and tricks. And so you're not going to be alone when you're preparing for these trips. We're always here to check in and just make sure that if you have any questions, we can answer those for you. So I always like to say you don't have to be perfect in that category to join a trip. And with that, anything else to add, Allie and Amanda, before we go into the Q&A?
Perfect, level. There's lots of nuance here. So always give us a call, especially if you're considering some of these higher level ones. We can go into the nitty-gritty details so you know exactly what to expect with mileage, with gains and losses, with the terrain. We can, share photos of the trails from past trips. We can give you the detail that can, maybe set your mind at ease or just at least paint a really realistic picture for you so you know what to expect.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thank you, Amanda. Well, let's hop into the Q&A because I know that we went over a lot of detail and we probably won't be able to get into everything just because we have a lot of questions. So we'll answer the ones that we can. And then if your question was not answered, then please feel free to email us. We have our general email address here. We all monitor this. So either Allie, Amanda, and I will get back to you. One of the first questions that I saw kind of pop up in here was what criteria do you apply to the trek level hiking? That is more of our challenging trip. So anything that's kind of hiking that is not kind of trekking with a more strenuous, challenging terrain, high altitude, that you really are trying to get from point A to point B. It's not about kind of, smelling the roses, if you will. Those are going to be in the challenging category. So anything else is going to be hiking, high energy, maybe a dynamic trip for those beginner hikes. So if you are into trek level hiking, that is our challenging category. And then I don't know if you want to take this, Amanda or Allie, but for moderate and dynamic trips, how much elevation gain is kind of average for those hikes or walks? I can also take that if you want.
Allie, you want to grab
So
that?
that's going to vary. It's definitely going to be on the lower side. So like what we talked about later in the presentation, you're not really going to feel like any altitude at all with these trips. Just generally, they are going to be more of like the European style trips, things like that. So you're gonna be more at sea level there. But you may get up. I would say, what do you think, Emily? That there may
I'd
be
say it's like
like
a few hundred feet, could be. I'm just trying to
exactly.
think some of the trips I've done in that category. It's not significant. So
Yeah.
it's maybe a couple hundred feet. I'd say maybe several hundred on some of the trips, but that would be pretty unusual. So in those that are more kind of like walks, and then on the dynamic trip, those lower intensity hiking trips, I'm thinking like Scotland and some of those, you might see more in kind of the several hundred, maybe up to 1,000 for like one day, but it's not consecutive days.
Exactly, exactly. That one's going to focus on those paces more, especially the level 2 is going to be more about endurance a little bit. So it'll be more about just like walking a few miles and things like that. But as far as the physical effects, they should be none. So
Yeah. I mean, I think I always like to say, the moderate trips are kind of like easy pace with some active options. So, you will be having some opportunities to get out, stretch your legs, but it's not anything significant. On dynamic, it depends on the trip. The multi-sport trips, you don't see as much hiking, so those will be shorter miles, not as much elevation gain. And then the ones in the dynamic category that fall into like the lighter, easy hiking category, those you will see a couple days of having some gains and losses. But again, it depends on the specific trip, so please let us know if you're thinking of one, and we can give you those specific details. We also have on our website great information about the hiking details. So if you click into a trip, you can see each day what the expectations are in terms of the hiking, the mileage, the terrain, and the elevation gains and losses. So if you're interested, that information is on our website in each individual trip if you go through the day-by-day itinerary.
There's
And
there's a good question here, Emily, that I think you can address, especially from the Camino side. When you hike longer, say 8+ miles, are there intermittent breaks, or do the days tend to be pushing hard for mileage?
oh, yes. That's a good question. So on our high energy trips, there's lots of breaks. So, part of those trips are also kind of taking in the scenery, the experience. You might have some cultural immersion activities. So what you tend to do on those, it's not point A to point B. You're stopping a lot. The guide's telling you about the flora and fauna, or maybe you're walking by a vineyard. This happened to me on the Camino. The woman there just welcomed us in. It wasn't planned, and we were able to have a conversation with her and hear about her background and experience. So breaks on the high energy trips are very common. Of course, you need water breaks. You need to snack and refuel. So that's very common. On the challenging trips, there are some days like on Kilimanjaro when you're going up to get to the summit. You are timed. I mean, it's a long hike, and you're starting really early in the morning so that you can get there for sunrise. So that one is going to be more kind of specific. Go, go, go. Not a lot of stops. Same when you're doing your final descent day, because most people leave that day. People have to get to the airport. Outside of that, when it's not those longer days or you're not trying to summit, those hikes do have, breaks. Usually stop, every hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, get a break, have some, of course you can drink water throughout, but just so people can rest and refuel. So those are built in. And again, people have different paces. So the faster group, might keep going the slower pace, more leisurely pace, as I like to say, because I don't feel like I'm slow. We might kind of take shorter breaks because we're kind of meeting up with the group, have some water, and keep going, just because we're not pushing our bodies as hard as the people going point A to point B.
Touch on the carrying your baggage, the option to opt out on some of these sag wagon, I know that comes up a lot.
Yeah, that's a good question, Amanda. So, on almost all of our trips, you're carrying a day pack. So your luggage, your overnight luggage, is going to be moved from place to place. So in the Dolomites, they had vehicles that went from hut to hut. When you're in Peru, there's a caravan of donkeys and horses that are taking your bags. So we tend to not be that traditional kind of trekking. You're carrying all of your stuff in and out. You might have a day or two where you do this. Like on the Switzerland trek, you do this so you can get to a more remote hut. So that is pretty common. So you just want to be very comfortable carrying a day pack, anywhere 15 to 20 pounds. I think my day pack's about 30 liters. So it's not that big, but I pack my layers in it, my snacks, extra water, extra socks, always key, just in case it rains, or I just like to have socks in case my feet get sweaty, maybe too much information. So you just want to make sure when you're training for high energy and challenging trips, you have your day pack, fill it like you would as you're walking, hiking, trekking, wear your boots just so you break them in and get comfortable with them.
Great tips. I love that. Somebody else asked, and I love this question because we do have a lot of conversations like this. Is there a training plan for someone who lives in Florida? And it's because you are at sea level, and we totally
Yes.
get it. We totally get it. We have conversations with folks like you all the time. So yes.
We can't all live in Colorado and
Right.
we dream about it, but yes,
Yeah.
so this is very common. A lot of folks are traveling from places at sea level or are not, in mountainous regions where they can train. So I'm in Pittsburgh. We have a lot of hills. We have a lot of stairs. So what I do is I use my natural environment. I actually don't have a gym membership. What I do is I go out and do hikes and make sure the hikes have elevation gains. And then if I'm training for a challenging trip that has the steeper elevation gains, I go and do stair workouts. So you can find a set of stairs. We have them all over here in Pittsburgh, but if you don't, then you can find like a stadium, maybe like, college or high school, and you can just put your pack on, put your boots on, and just walk up and down the stairs. That really naturally mimics that feeling of, hiking up some of these steeper areas and with the bigger elevation gains. So we'll give a lot of tips when you sign up for a trip. We connect you with our great trip managers who we highlighted before, and they all have done many of these trips themselves, so they can give you their personal experience. And then for our challenging trips, we do offer a training guide just so you can get an idea of what the expectations are for training for those trips. We want you to feel supported and we want you to be successful. So we're here to offer all of that behind the scenes once you sign up.
And I think kind of off the back of that, we're talking a lot about people maybe trying to train up to and see if they can like challenge themselves and take these next level trips. But also, Heather asked, do you have pace minimums at the different levels?
Mm-hmm.
And I know, some people are worried that they'll be at the back of the pack and the pace level, but also we do have other really active hikers who are worried about being held back and not being able to go at their fast pace. So I wanted to touch on that like you were saying, Emily, there are often kind of two groups. They're the fast hikers that are just barreling through, and you're not going to be alone with that. You'll be with a guide, you'll be with other fellow fast hikers, and it's okay if you're at the back of the pack. Someone's going to be the slowest and someone's going to be the fastest in every group.
Usually
and
me.
that's okay.
I'm usually the slowest. I'm proud to admit it. That's a really good point. And so when we plan these trips, we kind of use 25 minutes per mile, 30 minutes per mile. So if you're training and you can do a couple miles per hour, that's really what we're looking at in terms of putting these trips together. And we put the mileage, that's the number that we're using when we're saying, it's this many miles, it takes you this long to do the trip. Some people are a little bit faster, some people a little bit slower. If you're training and it's taking you an hour to hike a mile, we might want to talk about that. It might not be the best fit for you, but maybe some of our shorter, dynamic trips that have a day of hiking would be a good fit. So just to kind of give you an idea of the range for hiking and mileage and paces. I did see a question that was really good one. So planning, best time of year to go to these places? Absolutely. So for example, we used to do Everest Base Camp in April. We now do it in October. We kind of learned, in terms of like best time to go there. Of course, you want to be prepared for all different weather, especially when you're going at different altitudes. So, on many of these hiking trips, you want to be prepared for having some rain. I always bring my rain gear, make sure it's waterproof, stay in the shower. test it out. Trust me, you'll want to. I was in the most epic rainstorm in the Dolomites. Even though we had done that, everything just got wet. It was so epic. So it happens. So you want to be prepared for all those different pieces. But yes, we do plan kind of best times, usually shoulder seasons, because you get good weather, but fewer people, better flight prices. So we tend to look at shoulder season just because we find that really works for the folks who travel with us.
We also had several questions come in that I think are just broader for all of our trips, beyond the when are we planning, but are snacks or meals included? Do you have single accommodations? All of these types of more general questions unrelated to specifically activity levels. Yes, we have single and double accommodations. You can always check with us if you have specific questions or needs. The meals that are included on the itinerary day to day. You can see what's included there. If you're worried more about carrying your own snacks in your day pack, you will have to bring those. But yes, we'll definitely talk to you about what you need to prep for some of these longer hiking days and such. So that's really just the level 4, level 5 activity levels. The lower level trips, you'll be fed plenty. Don't worry.
Maybe too much.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, like Amanda said, I kind of oscillate between kind of the moderate dynamic and then up to the challenging, and they all are very, very different. I'm heading to Vietnam, Cambodia next week, so that is one I'm really excited about. So I'm someone who kind of goes back and forth. So sometimes I gain 5 pounds and sometimes I lose 5 pounds. It just depends on which trip I'm doing.
We also had somebody ask, at what point prior to a trip is the information released, especially training tips and packing tips, etc. For those, the higher level, the level 4 and level 5 trips, if you have not taken those before, as Emily said, we're going to want to touch base with you and have a chat and just make sure that everything, you're prepped and ready and ready to train. So we can provide those training tips very early on. Packing tips will be closer to actual departure, but your fantastic trip manager will be sending out everything from what to pack to what to expect with currency and electricity and guides and transfers from the airport. Tons and tons of detail, so you don't have to worry about all those little nitty-gritty ones.
Yeah, it's really good. Someone did ask, are levels comparable with other travel companies? This is like the hardest thing to do is like match activity levels. So the answer is no. Every company has kind of different categories in the way they design those. So if you are traveling with other companies or looking between companies, you just want to pay attention to the nuances because they don't often overlap. There's often differences. Like a moderate trip for us versus a moderate trip for like, I don't know, a crazy hiking company, that might be a moderate hiking trip, which we feel like is more kind of in our, high energy category, but they might call it moderate, for example. So you just really want to pay attention as you're comparing companies and itineraries. They do differ. All right. Any final questions?
What I saw in there is someone asking if we're hiring guides. I get it.
We are not. So we work with amazing ground operators.
Yeah.
They hire guides directly. So we do not hire guides as a company. We get that question all the time. But yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, thank you all for joining us. I know it's been kind of a lengthy conversation, but I hope that you were able to learn a lot and kind of see where you fit in these different categories. And as we've discussed, we're always happy to talk. That's what we're here for. We love talking. So, if you want to give us a call or send us an email, we'll kind of answer based on who has the best experience or, who kind of has done that trip. So I tend to do like Camino, Tanzania, things like that, and the challenging trips. But yes, so we'll make sure we get right back to you. And again, we always love having these conversations. So please don't be shy. Please don't hesitate. We also have a chat feature on our website. So if that's easier, feel free to hop on the chat. We can just answer those questions directly on our website. Well, thank you all. It's been lovely presenting to you. And we hope to see you on a future trip if you're not already signed up on one. And have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
You guys.